Hello, everyone. Hi. Hi. Can you hear me? Yes, excellent.
Can
Yes.
hear you but can't see you.
Oh, can't see me.
Nope.
I can see you.
Okay.
You have to-
It may be an issue of clicking on the view option on your Zoom so that you can see me. Okay, so what did everybody think of that music that we just heard and that image? For those of you that got to see it. So that is the beautiful artwork of Kyle Cornelius. And I'm actually going to include so he created both the image and the music, and I'm gonna message you I'm actually gonna message you his Instagram handle as a link so that you can just check him out. Excellent. All right, thank you all for joining here today. How are we all feeling? From South Carolina, where is everybody coming from? I'm over here in the Washington, D.C. area.
I'm
That
in
image
Washington,
collaboration
D.C.,
of music.
Northeast.
Northeast D.C.
Yep.
All right. Okay. All right, so welcome. So here we are. This is taking the next step beyond psychedelic healing in our collective psycho-spiritual evolution. This is part 3 of the Great Shift series of webinars. And thank you so much for joining me. So I'm James Moran, and I became involved in the field of psychedelic therapy in the early 1990s. When I was an adolescent, I became very drawn to the subject, not as for something recreational, for something fun, but just as a drive to kind of understand that there was this subject that could be used to understand life, reality, myself. And I began to study with Dr. Stanislav Grof at that time in the early 1990s. And I've since then been an avid psychonaut and avid meditator. And for the past decade, I have been a professional archetypal astrologer and student of the cultural historian Richard Tarnas and founder of Archetypal Astrology. And I'm so happy to be with you here today. I'm going to be talking for just about half an hour, and then we're going to get into a lively discussion via a question and answer type format using the chat function at the bottom of your your window here, your Zoom window, whether you're on a phone or you're on a computer. I'm going to use that chat function. Okay. All right. And speaking of which, why don't we use the chat function right now and keep it close by, because during the talk today is actually going to be somewhat of a collaboration between myself and you, in the sense that I'm going to be asking for your thoughts and your perspectives as we explore together on the way. And speaking of which, why don't we start with some questions just to get to know each other? How about this? Who here is personally, we'll start with the easy one. Who here is personally interested in the healing involved in the ceremonial and or therapeutic use of psychedelics? Who here is involved in I see some hands up. And if so, why? Curious. Why are you interested in the healing involved in psychedelic therapy, ceremonial and or therapeutic use of psychedelics? Okay. We're using the chat function. We're using the chat function to answer the questions. So yes. So go ahead and the chat function is at the bottom of your screen, whether you're on a phone or a computer. So click on that, it's a little chat icon, and then you can type in. So for instance, Chris here is saying it's a powerful healing tool. Jim, to reset the brain and allow the truth to set in. Barbara says it's a healing, it's on the altered states of consciousness, which is very effective. Altered states of consciousness is a very effective method for healing. I'd like to be trained to use it as a psychotherapist. That's wonderful. That's really valid. One ceremony substitutes 10 years of therapy. All right. The same reason I got interested in the 1990s. Expanded awareness, good total reset. Okay, so next question. Have you ever had an experience in conjunction with psychedelic therapy in which, have you ever had Sorry. Have you ever had an experience in conjunction with psychedelic healing that involved a personal insight or personal breakthrough that you were then able to incorporate back into your everyday life? You were then able to integrate into the responsibilities and the duties of your everyday life. Has anybody ever had an experience like that? Type it into the chat. So yeah, so the question is, okay, so yes, sure. Marilyn, Linda, Mark, many of them, of course, definitely. So why, if you feel like sharing, if you're willing to share what the experience was and why do you feel you're able to integrate it back into your everyday life? Had an epiphany around 23 that changed my life, says Jim. Understanding that reality is an indivisible whole, says Aaron. Beautiful. Okay. Have you ever had an experience in conjunction with psychedelic healing that involved a personal insight or personal breakthrough that you then were not able to bring back into the everyday duties and responsibilities of your life and not able to integrate? Okay. Jim says no, he has not. No. Linda says yes. Why do you feel that you were not able to? Working on it, says Linda. Okay, I brought them in, but it made others uncomfortable, I think. Okay, yes, that's a very personal admission. That's something that probably many of us have navigated. It seemed like a no, but later on was integrated, says Fola. So Marilyn says, I didn't have integration as a possibility. Wow. And without not having the continued integration support is an issue as well. Okay, so how about, so this is all stuff we're going to explore here today. So how about who here feels that psychedelic healing holds promise for rescuing our struggling ecosystem? Okay, I do, yes. How about why do you have that sense? All of us, Marilyn says, all of us. I know, a bit of a leading question, I know. I'm just curious on your perspective of why it has the possibility to, yes. Because the plant told me so, says Mark. Beautiful poetry. Okay, because it frees us into transpersonal collective thought, says Mark. Very important. Restore connection with the web of life. Okay, Stephanie wonders, Fola wonders, will humans do the work though? Okay. Stephanie says, psychedelics seem to lead to holism, and holism is healing. I just love the poetry that we're experiencing here today. Okay, so let's jump into it. So in accordance with a lot of the kind of enthusiasm that we're reading here, and also some sense of import, a lot of in this current psychedelic renaissance that we're in, I have noticed personally that many of the people that I've met have placed a sort of like a last bastion of hope in psychedelic healing, in the sense that a last bastion of hope on a personal level to free us from the addictions, compulsions, complexes, neuroses that torment us, you know, on a last bastion of hope on the collective level for humanity to save itself from itself. Okay, so this association is sometimes linked up with an association of psychedelic medicine with nature. And this association can be somewhat easy to grasp because many psychedelic substances are derived from plants, derived from fungi, obviously members of the natural world. There's another association there, though, that was unearthed by the research into psychedelic therapy, which discovered that there is an inherent healing intelligence, an inherent healing operation within the human psyche itself. And psychedelic medicine actually activates and contributes to this inherent healing intelligence within the human psyche, allowing us to heal from traumas, psychospiritual wounds, like the body heals us from cuts and breaks. Yeah. Yeah. So this inherent healing intelligence is easy to associate with the world of nature and natural processes, as opposed to the contrast between the institutions and ideologies of organized human society. So another question for you. Do you feel more comfortable placing your unique path of psycho-spiritual growth in the hands of nature and natural processes, or the hands of the institutions of structured human society? Hands of nature, says Sira. It's always interesting just to see how people respond to this question. Okay, Stephanie says society is weird. Marilyn says both. Rita says nature. And Aaron says our hands are the hands of nature. Fulla says we are not separate. You guys are jumping ahead. So, okay, so when I was an adolescent, I was assigned a book in school called Flowers for Algernon. Does anybody remember this book, Flowers for Algernon? Yeah, okay. I see some hands raised. So in Flowers for Algernon, the main character named Charlie he has a stunted intellectual capacity due to a developmental disability. And Charlie is entered into an experiment in which he is given a drug which catalyzes intellectual genius in him. And he becomes erudite and he becomes sophisticated, but as erudite and sophisticated as he becomes, he remains emotionally stunted somewhat on the emotional level. He remains stunted on emotional level. And so when I think of this novel now, reflect back on it now, I can't help but feel like that it's a metaphor for where we are at as a collective in our stage of psychospiritual growth as a collective, except in reverse, actually, in reverse, because we as a collective have already achieved a sort of towering intellectual genius. I almost said souring intellectual genius, a towering intellectual genius. And we have the intellectual wherewithal, the technological capacity to do things like end world hunger, cultivate clean energy, heal our struggling ecosystem. Our issue is that we are mired in the same behavior patterns of conflict, oppression, exploitation that have riddled our past for time immemorial. And it's actually our intellectual astuteness, it's the power of our intellectual discernment that makes us painfully aware of our moral track record as a species. So going back to Flowers for Algernon, it's like we as a collective society are getting entered into an experiment, just like Charlie was entered into an experiment, and we as a collective society are being administered a drug via the medicalization, legalization of psychedelic therapy. But unlike Charlie, we've already achieved intellectual super strength. So the side of us that is going to be released, activated, catalyzed by this experiment, by this drug, quote unquote, is a different side of us altogether. And so here we are, we're walking this tightrope where we're taking these psychedelic medicines that we associate with nature and the natural world, and we're subjecting them to a vetting process by the institutions of structured society for their suitability to be integrated into those laws and structures of human society. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay, so another question. Let's see. Who are you in favor of the medicalization, legalization process of psychedelics? Of course, says Chris, yes. So do you feel that the healing will retain its purity on the other side of the process being integrated into the laws and structures of our society? Okay, so Linda says legalization medical model is complicated. So Chris says it should. Stephanie says yes, but I worry about the context and it will be implemented in. Wonderful answers. Okay. So my personal feeling here, and please also, as you're listening to me, watch the chat because it's going by fast and there's some gems there. So my personal feeling is that any societal structure that integrates psychedelic medicine into its laws and its fabric is going to be forever altered by that psychedelic medicine. And for that, we already have a positive example in that the original research into psychedelic therapy, and particularly the pioneering research of Dr. Stanislav Grof, took the intellectual might of our era and encountered for the first time in a study setting the inner healing intelligence and witnessed that. You know, the intellectual power of our time, witnessed for the first time in a study setting the inner healing intelligence inherent in the human psyche. And those two came together to form a synthesis that was more than the sum of its parts. Yet, in order for that synthesis to take, there had to be a third component that was added, because as sharp as our paradigm, as sharp as our intellectual paradigm of science and psychology had become, it could not make sense of the types of experiences that the inner healing intelligence was bringing up in the study participants, okay? So it wasn't until Grof and other researchers called upon the wisdom traditions of humanity's past that they were able to start to make sense of the types of experiences the inner healing intelligence was bringing up in study participants. Wisdom traditions of humanity's past, the shamanic, the meditative, the mystical, the esoteric. It turns out that many of these wisdom traditions from humanity's past have at their root a personal encounter with the inner healing intelligence that either resembles psychedelic healing or actually involves actual examples of psychedelic healing. So this wisdom tradition provided the third vital component. When it was combined with the intellectual discernment of our time, inner healing intelligence, and the wisdom traditions, then Grof was able to come up with an expanded cartography, an expanded map of human experience that found a place for the transpersonal experience. So the study participants, the inner healing intelligence was bringing up in the study participants experiences that could not be made sense of by our intellectual paradigm. They're experiences that transcend linear time, local space, limitations of matter. Examples of these are like reliving past lives, identifying with a consciousness of animals, entering into divine dimensions. So these became known as the transpersonal category of experiences because they transcend the personal biographical story of our life, and they transcend the personal biological framework of our body. Okay. And so calling upon the wisdom traditions of humanity's past, the inner healing intelligence, and our intellectual discernment, Groff was able to come up with a map, an expanded map of human experience that found a place for transpersonal experience that made sense. It found a place for this transpersonal realm of experience to fit in the realm of human experience. This became known as the expanded cartography, Groff's expanded cartography of the human psyche. And without it, the research that the research going on today, the abundance, the wealth of research into psychedelic therapy would not be as far along as it is today. Yeah. So who here, do you know what I mean when I say wisdom traditions from humanity's past? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yes, yes. Yeah, okay. A little iffy. Clarity would be great. Okay, so the wisdom traditions of humanity's past, the shamanic, coming from tribal societies, the traditions that are involved, the institution of medicine, herbal medicine, psychedelic medicine in a societal setting, usually in a little bit more of a tribal society setting. Also, the kind of personal encounters with the healing intelligence that lie at the root, actually, of many of the origins of the religions, the organized religions in the world. Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Greek philosophy. Yes, so Aaron, Greek philosophy, there's comes from a culture that had integrated in the fabric of the culture the Eleusinian mysteries, which was a culture-wide phenomenon that involved ceremonies with psychedelic medicine. There's a book that came out recently that I'm not recalling the title of, which talks about exploring the Bible and different, experiences in the Bible, kind of prophetic experiences and different encounters, divine encounters that resemble psychedelic experience. So yeah, so mystics of all ilks, says Mark. So yeah, so that and also the esoteric traditions that involve gaining insight into what is behind reality, that their insights into reality are different from the scientific paradigm, the current scientific paradigm, which describes the universe as more of a machine-like phenomenon that is governed by unbending laws of time and space. And that was the kind of, where the bridge was needed. The scientific paradigm of a kind of a machine-like universe governed by unbending laws of time and space, and then these participants in these studies having experiences that transcended, for instance, time, local space. So I needed a bridge. So those are the wisdom traditions that created that bridge. So how about wisdom? What wisdom traditions do you personally feel aligned with or called towards? Just to give us some more examples, so I can call on a wider palette. Shamanism, Advaita Vedanta, Christian mystics, Pythagoreanism, East-oriented shamanism and Buddhism, Norse and Celtic shamanic practices, Gnosticism, psychosynthesis, Amazon healers, hippieism. Okay, great. So I'm actually gonna focus now on one wisdom tradition in particular, and a kind of like a super synthesis of this wisdom tradition with the inner healing intelligence and the intellectual discernment of our era. So in 2019, at the book launch for the 2-volume Way of the Psychonaut, Dr. Stan Groff, in front of an audience of thousands, declared that the next most fertile area of of research for the field of psychedelic therapy lies in archetypal astrology. Is anybody familiar with archetypal astrology? I am, says Stephanie. Great. Okay. So archetypal astrology is actually an approach to astrology that came out of Stan Grof's work in psychedelic therapy. Because we've already seen that Grof came up with the expanded cartography of the human psyche, that has room for, that makes sense of transpersonal experiences that one can have in this healing modality, right? Yet as groundbreaking as this map is, it remains a map in the general sense. It's not a diagnostic tool that pinpoints the position of any one person on the terrain that map represents and helps guide them through that terrain. Does that make sense? It's like imagine a paper map that represents a terrain, and then imagine a satellite GPS map that pinpoints your position on the terrain and helps guide you through that terrain, right? Okay, so in the 1970s, Grof and his protege Richard Tarnas were looking for such a diagnostic tool that could pinpoint an individual's position on the map of the expanded cartography of the human psyche, so that they can anticipate what types of experiences would come up in that person's healing journey, and so that they could also contextualize those experiences back to the person's everyday life. So they were looking for a tool, and they looked through the whole battery of tests and diagnostic tools in Western psychology without finding anything that fit their needs. And at that time, they were residing at the Esalen Institute in California. And there, one of the members of the community suggested that they utilize astrology to gain insight into the specific contours of a healing journey. And Grof and Tarnas were wary. They're hesitant at first because they already operate in such a marginalized field of psychology. They were wary of marginalizing themselves even more. And actually, what wasn't really widespread knowledge at this point is actually Carl Jung, one of the fathers of modern psychology, actually employed the tool of astrology regularly in his later life and later career to help him gain insight into the lives of his patients. Mark says, in for a penny, in for a pound. Glad they took the dip. So so they experimented. Grof and Tarnas figured there was no harm in experimenting, and then they were surprised to find that this tool of astrology actually provided them the diagnostic measures, was the diagnostic tool that they were looking for. And they, though they discovered that it worked best when they used it in a novel way. Does anybody have any foresight of what this novel way might have been? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with the transpersonal realm of experience, Okay, so traditionally, astrology has plenty of implications that inspire a sense of spiritual wonder, spiritual mystery, most notably that the movements of the planets in the heavens do not exert a causal influence upon events on Earth, but the movements of the planets in the heavens do reflect the movements of the planets the movements here on Earth, the movements of events here on Earth. Movements of the planets reflect movements of events here on Earth. This is sometimes referred to by saying as above, so below, right? Yet the tradition of astrology predates the invention of the telescope by millennia. So observations made traditionally in astrology were made using the naked eye. And the naked eye, the last planet visible to the naked eye in the order of the planets is the planet Saturn. And Saturn, the symbolism of Saturn in astrology has to do with the hard and fast limitations and responsibilities of living in and navigating a material world. Okay. And so for much of its history, actually, the tool of astrology was used to predict events that have to do with the mundane responsibilities and events that are taking place in our everyday life living in a material world. Okay. Does that make sense? So then in 1781, Uranus was discovered. In 1848, Neptune was discovered. In 1930, Pluto was discovered. And what Groff and Tarnas learned is that these more recently discovered outermost planets reflect the more recently discovered innermost potentials in the human psyche. Okay. So these planets became known as the transpersonal planets because their position at the time of an individual's birth will reflect the qualities of transpersonal experience that they might encounter on their healing journey. Okay? Does it make sense? So thus was born archetypal astrology. And the invaluable tool, the tool with such useful application for practical application for those on a dedicated path of psychospiritual growth. Using that satellite GPS metaphor again, the satellite GPS provides a bird's eye view of the neighborhood that you're navigating, and archetypal astrology provides a bird's eye view of the neighborhood that you're navigating in your personal healing journey, and it helps you navigate that neighborhood. So this is the super synthesis. This is the super synthesis of a wisdom tradition with the healing intelligence and with our intellectual discernment. This is the super synthesis that is creating the kind of Groff 2.0 era and the next breakthrough that we're heading into in terms of worldview. And, the synthesis is easy to see if we look at it's easy to see the synthesis between a wisdom tradition and our intellectual discernment, in the fact that the wisdom tradition of astrology would not be as far along as it is without our current intellectual paradigm of science and technology providing telescopes, powerful tools for seeing into the farthest corners of the solar system and of the universe even, right? Though adding to this triad, the healing intelligence within, then we get some implications that are more global in scale. Does anybody have any idea what these implications are? Beautiful. So the implications global in scale are in terms of, specifically, global implications in terms of our collective psycho-spiritual growth stage that we're in. When in the initial psychedelic revolution in the 1950s and 1960s, we were not just exploring inner space via psychedelic journeys, we were also actually exploring outer space via going into orbit and going to the moon, right? And in this current psychedelic renaissance that we're in, we're also seeming to reflect our inner explorations into inner space with another round of explorations into outer space. This time with the intention to explore deeper into outer space, and this time with the intention of setting up residence in outer space. Similarly to us setting up, trying to find a home, in the process of finding a home here on Earth in the societal structures that we live in for access to inner space via integrating psychedelic therapy into the laws and structures of our society, Does that make sense? So there's something inherently, so much of the healing that takes place in the ceremonial and or therapeutic use of psychedelics involves experiences of the transpersonal realms. Okay? There's something inherently healing about this expanded potential of the human experience. Okay? And the fact that we are reflecting our current inner journeys into inner space and our desire to set up in the structures of our society a home for this access to inner space, while simultaneously setting up a residence in outer space, it points towards, it kind of begs the parallel basically between our new home in inner space and our new home in outer space. And this parallel is, it echoes basically the fundamental principle of archetypal astrology, which is as without, so within, right? So could it be actually that by setting up a home for access to our inner space via legalization, medicalization of psychedelic therapy and integrating into the structures of our society, while also setting up home in outer space, could it be that actually what we are doing is we are setting up home in the transpersonal potential within us, in the transpersonal potential within us, by recognizing, by this very recognition that we're exploring together right now, by recognizing that that our everyday lives and even this very present moment have inherent in them a transpersonal element. Does that make sense? Are you with me? Okay, Stephanie says yes. So I'm going to begin soon to transition into the question and answer session. But before I do that, I want to leave you with an assertion, if I may. And that assertion is the element inherent in this present moment that we're sharing right now of the transpersonal holds within it freedom from our addictions, our compulsions, our complexes, our neuroses. So the transpersonal element inherent in this present moment holds within it the potential for us to be better caretakers for ourselves, for others, for other beings, for the planet. That is my assertion to you. That in this, the recognizing the transpersonal element in this very present moment is actually the recognition that others and other beings and the planet are reflections of ourselves. This is again, as without, so within. So I've covered a lot today: the history of archetypal astrology, a bit about the practice of archetypal astrology, where we stand in this moment of time. It's a very pivotal moment of time, not just in terms of pandemic and changing of kind of the technological milieu of our society, but also in the sense that we are kind of setting up, we're setting up a home of access into the transpersonal realm, of course, via psychedelic therapy, legalization, medicalization, setting up possibly a home in outer space as well, inner space, outer space. Right now, what we're doing is we're recognizing the parallel between the two, the inner and the outer, that is with us in any moment. It's with us right here, right now. So I'm eager to get into some questions with you. I just want to say, before I do, first of all, thank you for joining me here and being such a sweet audience. The most valuable thing is our time and our attention. And so I appreciate you spending your time and attention here with me. I also want to say that you're going to be receiving an email. You'll of course receive the replay. You're also going to receive a link. And if you click on that link, enter your email, join my mailing list, you will receive this is the third part in a 3-part webinar series. You'll receive access to all the webinars, and each webinar has a companion ebook. You'll receive a complimentary copy, companion ebook for each webinar. And for this webinar, the companion ebook is called Snakes in the Heather, and it details a young man's journey with his uncle through a shamanic ritual that actually kind of captures the spirit of what we've been exploring today in terms of exploring the transpersonal and its place in our life. And so you have access to that. You also get access to a coupon code to an archetypal astrology reading with myself so that you can experience what we've also been talking about, the diagnostic tool of archetypal astrology and how it can actually play, you know, how you can use that GPS system to pinpoint your own position on the map of your own healing path. And so you're going to receive that, receive the replay. And if you're watching the replay right now, then you just click on the link associated with the replay and you'll get all the same goodies. In fact, I'm going to be emailing all this to you, but I figure as long as I have you here, I'm just going to put it in the chat too. Okay, so excellent. I'm so happy to be here with you all. Thank you so much for listening. And I'd love to kind of get a little discussion going with some questions in the chat. Anybody up for a discussion and some questions? Yes. Oh, sweet. Jen is saying, I highly recommend a reading. It's a beautiful thing to see your self-evolution mapped out in the universe. Amazing. Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, Jen. That's beautiful. All right. So people are up for some questions. So go ahead and fire some questions. And yeah, anything. We can explore, you know, personal experiences you've had. And I think of set and setting, this is Emily, as being, I think of set and setting as being the most important part of a psychedelic experience. How does one's natal chart factor into this? Yeah, so set and setting is the classic container for a psychedelic session, in the sense of set is the mindset that we bring into it. And of course, we're going into a healing experience. So we want to bring a mindset of recognizing that and knowing that we could go very deep. And then also setting is the environment. So we know we're safe, so that we can surrender, we can open up, and we know that we're going to be safe in that container. And psychedelic archetypal astrology basically plays a role in the sense of it can help with the set, because it can help get a sense of where we are at even before the journey, even before the psychedelic journey, where we are at in our personal lives and maybe why we're there. And where are we really, you know, when we're in everyday life, the events of everyday life are so close to the face. It's almost like when we're navigating, if we don't have a GPS map, it's hard to just visualize a bird's eye view of where we stand, because we're like, you know, we're on the ground, we can't see what the next block holds. So even before going into a journey, seeing the map can give a sense of just a wider perspective on our life, even before the journey of what neighborhood am I even in again? You know, where am I going? Like what? And so it gives that perspective, which can kind of bolster up one's set and get a sense of kind of what we're heading into. And then it operates as a wonderful integration tool afterwards, after a session, because, you know, we have these powerful experiences and it helps contextualize back to our life those experiences, because the map that is given is not just a map of the transpersonal. It's not just a map of realms of experiences of identity, identifying with consciousness of animals and divine dimensions. It also includes our everyday life and our everyday practical fabric of existence, and the meeting of the two. You know, that's kind of the terrain. Okay, so there's quite a number of questions here, so I want to make sure to get to all of them. Hopefully that was helpful. All right, what do you think about the fact that we are wanting to set up home on Mars, planet war, sex, and creativity? Wonderful question by Catherine. So she's referring to the astrological symbolism of Mars. And the creativity part, I'm not as clear on. Creativity, if I'm going to make an association with Mars because of sexuality, creativity, because there is a Mars component in sexuality. Creativity in the sense of Mars is a vitalizing kind of archetype, has a sense of it gets us very vitalized. Maybe that's what it is. But definitely war, Mars, the archetype of all the planetary archetypes have a broad, rich spectrum, everything from the challenging side to the rewarding side. The rewarding side is get up and go, pep and step, activation, assertiveness. The challenging side is assertiveness, frustrated, conflict, aggression. Yes, I don't know what to anticipate symbolically in terms of humans going to Mars and what that means in terms of Mars symbolism, but I can say this: how much better would it be for the human race to travel to the moon and to Mars, knowing what the symbolism of those archetypes reflect about ourselves as an individual and as a species. So it's almost like if we're going to set up residence on the moon, we're going to set up residence on the Mars. What is the moon and what is Mars inside ourselves? What does that symbolize? That would be my approach. My approach would be to understand the terrain, the inner terrain, and honor it and make a place for it here in my individual life and in our collective life. And then maybe the kind of living on that actual planet might be something a little bit more informed in terms of our collective spiritual, psychospiritual growth. That's my feeling. Okay. So Mark says, I missed the first two sessions. How are astrology and archetypes connected? Each planet, so there's a basic, when we look at the astrological birth chart, which is a picture of the sky, it's like a pictogram of the sky when we were born, it looks as if we are looking from the eyes of an astrologer into if you could, your birth chart would be as if you were looking in a mirror. If you could have a mirror that didn't just reflect the surface of your body, but actually reflected your inner nature. And so in that picture is like a map of our inner nature. And then the planets on that map are, the positions on that map is like, it just is like a portrait of our inner nature. And each of them reflects an archetype. An archetype is a band of symbolism, like we used with Mars. It has everything from its challenging side to its rewarding side, all of them. And it shows kind of the, it's almost like reverse engineering. If somebody were to bake a cake, and reverse engineer it and see what are the ingredients, what measures, what went into it. And that's the same with us. We can see like, oh, why do I have this flavor? Why am I like this? Oh, I can see like the basic ingredients that go into the creation of me. And then there's a deeper level of like, oh, if I understand these sides of myself, that's really a lot of the healing that comes in to say like, a lot of what we perceive as flaws in ourselves are usually energies of ourselves that we haven't quite fully understood yet and placed in the proper arena. Once we get, when we see the map and we see like, oh, this thing that I was really irked about myself about is actually a strength when it's understood, it's seen with that clarity of that kind of broader focus, and it's understood like, oh, okay, it belongs in this arena where it's actually a strength. I mean, with clients, you see it all the time, like somebody who talks really loud and they're really like, this like powerful energy and everybody's like, and then you realize they're like, oh, you're meant, like you see that kind of in the story and the contours of their life, how it's actually this strength. And when it's not placed in the right arena, it's looked down upon. But actually when it's placed in the right arena, you're like, you go, like it's great, it's powerful. So hopefully that answered a bit. The planets are archetypes. The planets are their position, again, reflecting as without, so within. It's reflecting the archetypes that comprise us, the basic ingredients of perception and reality that comprise our individual experience. Okay, so I recently enjoyed a mushroom ceremony in Ann Arbor. Okay, great. So there's some resources here for people to key into. Okay, so Andrew's asking, so archetypal astrology wasn't discovered until recently. Before then, it was just astrology. Yes, that's right. It was just astrology, but also it was many different traditions of astrology. There's many different traditions of astrology, different cultures, which are like different inflections of the major tradition. And archetypal astrology is just one inflection, which is part of a larger trend in astrology of these outer planets and using astrology as a tool to understand the depths of our psyche, as opposed to using it as a tool to predict the kind of everyday events of our mundane life. You know, when am I going to have a kid? What's up with the job? You know, how do I maintain safety, you know, during this, kind of thing, this thing that I'm engaged in, activity that's a little bit dangerous, something like that. You know, these different kind of ways of using it as a practical tool. I would say also archetypal astrology is a practical tool. It's a practical tool for the psychospiritual growth of the individual, which is one of the most practical activities we can engage in, because that is how we as a collective grow, and that's how we take care of our planet, we take care of each other, and we open our hearts and we experience just how beautiful and wonderful life is. So that is, in my personal world, a very high priority. Okay, so how much does one's current transits affect their psychedelic experience versus just one's natal birth chart? Okay, excellent question. Another good question. So the birth chart refers to the whole life and the whole psyche. And that is something we can look at any point in our life, and we can always gain new insights into it because it's rich and nuanced as we are. You know, it's just a reflection of us. So it's as rich and nuanced as us, and we can look at it at different times in our life and gain insight into ourselves by looking at that birth chart. And that birth chart will point towards different types of qualities of experience coming up in psychedelic healing, because it points towards our general nature. It kind of indicates our general nature. It indicates general overall overarching themes in our life. Okay. And it's kind of, it gives us optics and a line of sight into our specific qualities of life experience, basically for our whole life. And then transits are give an insight into a specific window of time of where we are in that larger arc of unfolding. So there's larger arcs of themes that are in the birth chart of our life's unfolding. A transit chart will capture a specific window of time. Where are you in that arc of unfolding? And it will give us some anticipation of what role a psychedelic healing experience will hold for that, and maybe even what type of experience will come up within that. The way I usually practice is we use a light hand when we're anticipating what type of experience will come up in a psychedelic session, because we're not here to determine or control the psychedelic session. That's for the inner healing intelligence. We're just here to prepare the person in a general way. And then after they have the psychedelic experience and they have the encounters that they have, then we can kind of come in with a full tool to help them integrate and understand and contextualize, because the healing intelligence has already spoken, and that's the real guide there. We're just kind of there to help understand. You know, the master chef has already baked the masterpiece. We're just there to say like, oh, that thing that you're tasting, that's, you know, that's vanilla. That's, you know, like, what were the ingredients that were used? What was how was it done? Help you get some context. Okay. Can real-time transits be considered part of setting? Oh, good question by Emily. Can real-time transits be considered part of setting? Well, my colleagues and I use it. We do use it in planning sessions. And again, we don't want to control, we don't want to kind of supersede like the healing intelligence, because inevitably it's going to work out in the way it is. And that's going to be great. You know, we're not here to control all that. But we do kind of, you know, we are like, oh, this general transit is going to have this quality and this one's going to have this quality. They're starkly different. Which one do you want to go for? So with it light hand, we kind of direct it that way. And then we notice like setting that's part of setting up setting is like, recognizing that. And then also, even during a session itself, sometimes we even break down the session by hours, sometimes when it's useful, because we look at actually what's called transits of the moon. So the moon moves quickly. Of all the heavenly bodies, the moon moves the most quickly. So the moon does a one round around the earth, around the whole zodiac in 28 days, right? The sun takes 365, you go further out, Mars takes 2 years, Jupiter 12, Saturn 28 years. The moon takes 28 days, right? So any transit of the moon is usually going to be about 3 hours, and the moon in the sky is transiting where a natal position, where a planet was when you were born. You're going to have an archetypal combination there, and it's going to be just a few hours in length, like 3 hours. Okay. So sometimes we look at that, just to get a sense of when it seems useful to get a sense of the different kind of waves of the journey, because you can have a transit of the moon where it's like, you feel kind of isolated. You're starting to feel kind of, like isolated from others in this journey. But then we know, like, oh, it's a window. It's only a few hours long. And plus it has its own lesson to teach us. There's something there about that process. Oh, and then we notice, oh, later on in the journey, there's a different transit where there's kind of an opening up and a reconnecting with the community, so we kind of see that rhythm, like, oh, okay, now's the time when it's kind of like the sense of feeling more like in solitude, and it's got its own gifts, and we'll find out what they are. And then we'll unfold in this other way where we kind of open back out. And sometimes it's nice to plan it in such a way, again, the way things work out is the way they usually are meant to work out. And that's what the transits really teach us ultimately in retrospect. When we look in retrospect, we usually see the beauty of the orchestration of the whole thing. We never could have planned it. But going into it, we do, with a light touch, some planning. It's all going to work out in its own way. But for instance, the end of a journey, sometimes you see a moon transit that is nice for community, for nurturing, for getting food, things like that. It's nice to set it up because, sometimes at the end of the journey, there could be a sense of, coming out of the experience into the company of others, into a good meal, so that's a kind of a curation of the experience that can happen, though not with a heavy hand, with an understanding that the healing intelligence and the orchestration of the archetypes in the universe is where it's at. And our role is more a role of appreciation and context, of understanding the context of it all, and reverence, really. I'm sorry that there's so many questions. I'm not sorry. I'm very excited. There's so many questions. I hope I can address them all. Okay. Let's see here. So what are some tools that people can use to facilitate inner access to transpersonal dimensions for peace and healing without the use of psychedelics? Thank you, Stephanie. So there's so many tools. Psychedelics is just one tool among a range of tools. Holotropic breath work, any different breath work practices, meditation practices. I mean, one of the points of the talk was actually to get us in touch with the underlying principle of archetypal astrology, as without, so within, is something that can be witnessed right now here in the present moment. Just with our awareness here in the present moment, with our breath, with being with each other, we can see that there's something miraculous going on where it seems like I'm a separate body and you're a separate body, but you exist within my perception, I exist within your perception. There's something else going on here that is actually transpersonal in nature. And that's what a lot of mindfulness meditation practice teaches, is to kind of like a little bit limit the sense perceptions, maybe closing the eyes, being in a quiet room, to really slow down and observe how in the present moment, there's actually a transpersonal component. It's if we really slow down and watch, there's something happening here that's quite transpersonal and quite beautiful. Yeah, it doesn't have to be psychedelics. I'm definitely, just like with astrology, the tool of astrology being used, in my opinion, as one of the best ways of using it is as a reverence and appreciation for the orchestration of the universe, understanding the context of the orchestration of the universe and appreciating it, celebrating it. Similarly with psychedelics, you know, I'm here to appreciate just these tools and not necessarily, you know, try to, you know, force them on anybody or anything like that. Yeah, so okay, so perhaps we can sublimate the archetype of war to be productive, war of ideas in a nonviolent way. That's amazing. That's what happens oftentimes with in archetypal astrology. What often happens, one of the great potentials of the use of archetypal astrology is when we see, for instance, a transit coming up, and it would be considered in archetypal astrology as a tense transit, means a challenging transit. But we know the archetypes involved, like for instance, Mars, you know, argumentativeness, as an example. We know the archetypes involved. We can kind of almost like with a mindfulness, an archetypal mindfulness, we can watch them coming up and be mindful of them in the present moment in such a way that we know that they are energies of the universe, just like everything and everybody, and they have their own place. And we're not here to resist them, but we're here to give them our presence and our participation and our awareness, and they tend to go in a better direction, as opposed to if we're kind of at war with war, for instance, like an argumentativeness comes up, and it's like, I don't want to be here, this isn't happening right now, this is not me, you know, like, what is this? You know, this is something outside of me that I don't agree with. You know, I'm at war with the argumentativeness that's happening right now. And if I look at my transits and say, oh, you know what, this is the right time for this type of energy to come up in my life, why don't I not be at war with it? And then when we're not at war with it, it's not a comfortable situation, it's argumentative, whatever. But I'm saying, like, we're going to be here, we're going to be with this. Like, what is this? You know, like, I'm just like mindfulness meditation, whatever comes in, let it come in, let it go out. And so I'm just here, I'm being attentive to it. And the archetypes tend to find a more productive manifestation. It's miraculous. They tend to, when we recognize and we're just here with whatever is happening, as difficult as it is, things tend to, it's like the universe wants to work out. It wants to take these archetypal combinations and reconcile them in new, productive ways. It's for us to kind of like allow the experience, be vehicles for that experience, and kind of be caretakers of that experience in a way. Okay, so this is what gets me when society brushes off the impact astrology has on humans. It's not just the moon is full or that Mercury is going retrograde. Yeah, the classic ones. Solar eclipse tomorrow. It's a deeper level of themes that each of these planets' bodies place on our consciousness and life. Yes. Wow. Thank you, Fola. Mark, are there any ties into the Enneagram? So the Enneagram is something that I don't know so much about, but I do know that colleagues of mine that I respect very much use it to great effect. So, you know, just like, you know, these things that come up, these kind of tools that we use that come out of ourselves and are kind of synthesized by the universe, you know, many of them have a great use, and the Enneagram seems to have a good use from what I can tell. I don't practice it myself, but I have respect for it. It's the same with Tarot. I don't practice Tarot myself, but I have seen it used in some pretty potent ways. And the Enneagram, like, ties to the Enneagram might be in the sense of kind of categories, almost like archetypes, from what little I know, like categories and archetypes that are a little bit similar to astrology in the sense that they're categories and they have their own kind of style associated with them, inclinations, tendencies. And also, as far as I understand with the Enneagram, there's a sense that each style has like a challenging side and a rewarding side, and a tendency of how it tends, if we're not working with it, how it tends to drag down, and if we're working with it, how it tends to kind of ascend up, which is similar to the archetypes. Thank you, Mark. So All right. What might you suggest the astrological archetype arc of the development of the US? A. In terms of where we're at right now, like some advice. Is that what you mean? Yeah. Well, the archetype, I just did a panel discussion actually, which I'll put in the, I'm actually going to put that in the chat here. And that explores in depth, very in depth. It's 3 hours long. Just put that in there. So the archetype, so the US, I guess without going into specifics, the US is going through a period, well, it involves Pluto, the archetype of Pluto. There's something called the Pluto Return. It takes 248 years for Pluto to go one time around the zodiac. And that's the age of the US roughly. So Pluto is coming into its return. And the archetype of Pluto has to do with the deep transformational potential within anything. A log might look boring, but when you place it on a fire, we realize it has inherent within it an ability to release energy, release heat, get transformed. And so in a personal chart, we can see that like in a psychedelic journey, when Pluto's activated, there tends to be a sense of just this inherent ability for us to transform ourselves, to like almost like shed our skin, like a snake sheds its skin, grow out of ourselves. And the US has that kind of being emphasized right now. And it, the trick there, as within a psychedelic session, the trick is to not hold on and to surrender to the transformative power of the experience, because just like a log, when it burns up, it's not a log anymore. You know, the power gets released and it's not a log anymore. It's been transformed. And similarly, oftentimes in our psychedelic experience, the senses of us getting transformed so much that we release our potential in the world and we're not holding on to anymore, like, you know, so many aspects of ourselves that we have to protect and this and that. And, you know, that we're just going to give it all. We're going to get totally burned up in the fire. And then, you know, what comes out is light and heat, to use the log metaphor. And so that by the end of this life, I've spent myself, you know, like there's nothing to hold. I don't carry anything with me out of this life anyway. So I might as well, you know, have my potential get realized. And so the US is having that Pluto return. Something to note about Pluto though, is that Pluto brings up the fires of the transformative potential of Pluto will bring up the Pluto is in the Greco-Roman mythology, the god of the underworld, and the archetype of Pluto, the way it transforms is it kind of disgorges from us the ugly, the things that are deep muck, you could say. It's associated with, in medical astrology, with boils. You know, you get an infection, you get something in there, and it comes out. The way it comes out isn't that pleasant. You know, it's a similar thing with our psychedelic experiences where we, you know, sides of ourselves come out and we're like, we have to face that. And we face it, and when we're with it and we face it, then the transformation potential happens. And so I feel there's some of that happening. There's more nuance you can see from watching the video, but that's part of my feeling, is that there's this confrontation with the underbelly of the psyche of the country, that is a kind of, again, that is unsavory. You know, it brings up these dark sides of ourselves, and as without, so within. So as we see the dark sides of the US showing up, that's us. You know, that's us. And so the fact that psychedelic therapy is being legalized, medicalized in the United States right now is I feel an example of that Pluto return, because that's on an individual level, that same transformative process. It's on the individual level, this kind of coming up, belching up of what's, you know, in Pluto in alchemy was associated with alchemical fire. It takes lead and burns out the dross, so it becomes gold. And that's the process. You kind of burn out the dross. And so wonderful question, Marilyn. Thank you so much. And we're going to take a few more. We're going to go for about 5 more minutes. Okay. Oh yeah, so there's some answers here to the previous question of other tools besides psychedelics, ecstatic dance, hypnosis, heart math sensor, Enneagram. All right, good. So we're coming to the end of the questions here. So, and thank you everybody for your support. And thank you, Gabriella, for recommending this, the panel discussion. If you're watching the replay, you can go to the panel discussion by searching Archetypal Vision 2020. That's the panel discussion. So thank you all for being here so much. Thank you so much for being here with me and with each other. These are exciting times. I really feel they are. And, you know, I'm excited. And I'm really very excited to have you with me here. It's wonderful to spend this time with you. And yeah, so thank you all so much for joining me here today. We're heading out of 20, we're heading into 2021. I wish you all wonderful things for coming into this next year. And yeah, Kyle, am I missing anything? Look up Kyle Cornelius on Instagram, the artist with the music that started us off. And look for that email, click that link. You can join my email list, get Snakes in the Heather, the ebook, and a coupon code to work with me. Thank you all so much. Love to you all too. Thank you, Mars Jupiter. Love you all too. Okay.